What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Simply Walk the Talk. I am your host, Joshua J. Holland, and today we are going to talk about what it means to be elevated. I myself am currently elevated, and my guest on today's show is as well. And we're going to discuss all that, what that means. Today we have Mr. Charles Flanagan on the show, and he's a celebrity trainer as well as an authority in all things cannabis related. Charles's training philosophies have been developed from being a successful track athlete himself to coaching national champions in that field. The one constant throughout his life has been strength training and being able to make ordinary athletes and people into the extraordinary. Charles has discovered cannabis several years ago and found that the therapeutic and medicinal benefits cured his addiction to alcohol and pharmaceutical drugs. He is a firm believer in a holistic approach to being the best. His thirst for knowledge in both fields have made him sought after authority in training and a cannabis consultant.
Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
Now, today I want to welcome Professor X. He's known as Professor X, and we're going to talk about why, right? But this gentleman is a bona fide superhero. You know, it's like if you look at him, hopefully you're watching this show so that you can kind of see his physique. We're going to be popping up a lot of videos and photos and things like that. But Mr. Charles Flanagan, welcome to the show, sir.
Man, Josh, man, it's good to be on it, man.
Yeah. You know, it's really fascinating that as I prepared for this show today, I like to do a lot of research behind either the products, the companies, or the people that come onto the show. And as I was developing more insight about who you are, it reminds me just how closely aligned you and I are. You know, we both are African American. We both are known as quote unquote celebrity trainers, and we can talk about that, like what that even means, because I know we have the similar sentiment around that term, celebrity trainer, and what that even means. We also are cannabis advocates and consultants, and we also support this idea of bringing about personal development and mental health awareness. And so all these things I want to make sure that we get the opportunity to dive into today so that people watching and listening to the show can take something from it, but also so I can continue to learn more about you and you learn more about me and we just chop it up. So yeah, thanks for being here.
Man, BJ, like I said before, thank you so much for having me. I've been a big admirer of your work from afar. You know, you kind of talked on you went over celebrity trainer. It's one of those topics or those terms I always tread lightly around, but you know, when you're talking about trainers, they're a dime a dozen. You know, so when you train, you know, people, you know, say to the likes of what you have, Oscar Isaacs, you know, Madonna, you know, Gigi, like those type of people, you know, put you in a different kind of landscape, you know. So you know, it was kind of, you know, important to me to I don't know, more or less being to the forefront of the guys behind the scenes. You know, we live in a culture now that is starved for, you know, how the DIY, you know, do it yourself. So when they see these people, you know, they're enthralled with them and they want to get some insights to, you know, how could I do that myself? So yeah, man, it as far as the celebrity training landscape and you know, you and I'd say the only similarity we have is the title. You're so much, I'd say, broader in that scope. You know, the people that you've trained, the things that you've done, Brody. So I'm so honored to be here, you know, and to be able to kind of talk about these topics with you, man. So and the fact that you're, you know, a consumption advocate, and that you like to stay enhanced and elevated like myself, I'm really excited to dive into that. I think that's been something that a lot of people don't have the insight on, especially the practical applications, how to train with
Yeah.
it, and I'm just chopping it up, man.
For sure. Yeah, I definitely want to hop in here and just kind of highlight the benefits of social media and fact that this is happening simply because you and I don't even remember exactly how we got connected, but I'm happy that that happened. And as I started to kind of see more about what you do, I'm like, wow, and like you would throw some content out there here and there, and I would share it or I would like it, and and then finally we had the opportunity to talk on the phone. And of course, if you go to Charles's Instagram, it's like it's obvious this guy is a complete specimen when it comes to like the aesthetic. He's very much in shape. You can tell that he takes care of himself. And so just off the bat, I know like there's a lot of work that goes into that, right? But then when I talked to you on the phone, it was like that didn't matter, like we connected on so many other
Yeah.
things, right? Because that didn't matter. And that's what I love when it comes to talking about someone who treats this space similar to how I do, which is like it doesn't matter who we worked with, like these things can maybe display that we have a certain amount of experience dealing with certain levels of people and things like that. But like when we talked on the phone, it didn't really matter like who I've worked with or whatever. We just were able to chop it up, knowing that we have a lot of things in common. So you know, I would love for you to talk about your upbringing, because I know when I listened to one of a previous podcast you did, that was one of the things that I first related to. I think is we have a similar background in how we were raised. I was raised in a small town in Chandler, Oklahoma, approximately 3,000 people, and it was majority white. Like literally all of my all of the black people in my community, or most of them, were my relatives. It's simply put, you know what I mean? Like that's how
Yeah.
it was. And so I would love for you to kind of talk about that and maybe how that has shaped you into the person you are today.
No, thank you. And I think that's largely what kind of helped you and I connect. Like, there are no, I'm a huge proponent. There are no laws of attraction. There are no coincidences. So I'm like looking at your profile, resonating with a lot of things you do. But when I started to listen to your podcast and listen to you interact, just your grammar, your dialect, I'm like, he paced and his cadence is very similar to mine. So then it prompted me to call you, and then I'm like, we really tapped in. That was when you started talking about your upbringing, which mine very, very similar, right? I grew up in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, Kirkland, Washington, to be exact. So the area I grew up in was majority white, only black people. I don't think that I saw another black person in a class or even in my school until I was in sixth grade. You know, the only other black person in the school other than my brother would have been my dad and the principal at that time. So uh, you know, it's funny to be reflective back to look at it now. Now, as a 43-year-old male, like I have so much gratitude for that upbringing. But at that time, and it wasn't easy. Um, where I came from Orange County, California, melting pot, and I was exposed to all different kind of cultures. Like I came from an elementary school or classes traditionally 50 children to a class, to when I moved to Kirkland, it was 20 kids to a class. And me being the only one of dark pigment was really heavily exposed. And I went through a lot, how you talked, how you were, the differences that now I think it's kind of great they're being a little bit more celebrated, weren't. They were exposed, and they were, I was, ostracized more often than not. So like what I am now is an amalgamation, or it's an adaptation of having to learn how to adjust to living in that dynamic. Because a lot of people don't realize, man, being black in a majority white area, as a young guy in the 80s, was very hard. It was very, very hard. um,
Absolutely.
so you and I had very similar stories. Like, and I like, and I talked to you about them, how they shaped is you're able to be in a world and interact with everyone. Like I have siblings and family members who have been around nothing but black people, It's great, but they only know that culture and they only know they're very culturally centered. So when they have to go outside that dynamic, they struggle, they struggle. And I think largely that's because our internal dynamic, as far as our culture, we're very emotionally driven. And I think, from outsiders, Caucasians and others, it's perceived as they take the emotional dynamic and they context it like that's angry, that's this, that's that. And it's just not, it's just how we are. We're very emotionally expressive. Whereas the Caucasian dynamic that I learned that they don't do things that way. They're not expressive that in that way. They're not vocally or emotionally, but there is, expression. It's just a different way. So it just gave me a better understanding of how to navigate that landscape.
For sure. The thing that comes up for me is, I'm curious how you how your background was. Were you an athlete growing up as well? Like, were you, because obviously you're
Yeah.
very fit right now, you're very big, and
Mhm.
what I'm trying to do is kind of draw this idea or this narrative around at least what some of what I grew up with, which is, and maybe you can tell me if you relate to this, but I grew up with this huge background of martial arts. And what that
Mhm.
meant was, so we're talking about African American brother, like me and my brother, right? And we were known as the Karate Kids, right? And we had this like everyone knew in our town, because remember it's a small town, everyone knew that we were the quote unquote badasses, right? And we were also expected to be the badasses, and so we got challenged all of the time because we were quote unquote supposed to be the badasses. Like my brother and I got our
Facts.
black belt when we were 11 and 12, and so not only did we have the pressure of having to be good athletes because of our you know I guess our gifts, right? Like our gifts of
Mhm. Right.
being black, but also like we were the children of the sensei. Our dad was our sensei, right? And we were
Mhm.
ranked in the country, or we were ranked in the state, number one and number two in the state. And so there was so much pressure around having to perform. And I, looking back on that, I realized that I had to learn how to navigate all of that from a very young age. I had to learn, like, what's the best ways to deflect certain situations. How do you enter a room knowing that you're the only black person, knowing that you're going to deal with a certain amount of judgment, right? Also
Mhm. Mhm.
speaking in a certain way and having to navigate the difference between being amongst my non-minority groups and being amongst my minority groups, right? Being amongst
Mhm.
black people, we would always get told, my brother and I, because we speak well, right? We're intelligent, we're educated. We were
You
always
sound
told,
white.
"Why you talk white, bro? You always talking so white,"
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So I know that's a kind of
Yeah.
a long preamble into trying to come, bring something out of you, but like, can you touch on that?
Yeah, no, it is, man. It's because you have to navigate and tether to the two worlds. So yeah, I absolutely played sports. When I came from California, the melting pot, like I spoke Spanish. I spoke a little Tagalog, bro. I spoke Romanian. I spoke all these different dialects because that was what I was exposed to. I moved to Kirkland. There's nothing but just whatever. Um, so there was no athletics. I think the first kids that I saw were they were out in the field and they were playing football. I never played football. I rode skateboards back in Cali because that was a thing. Everybody was riding skateboards. It was what everybody did in the '80s, right?
I did it.
Nobody was doing that in Kirkland. Yeah, see? And nobody was doing that in Kirkland. So I saw them playing football. And so they grabbed me. They're like, hey, do you play football? I'm like, no. They're like, well, you're fast, right? I said, "Oh, I don't really know. I've never had to race like that." So they gave me the ball, bro, and it was a wrap. I couldn't catch, I couldn't do anything from that standpoint, but I was incredibly elusive because I just was as far as our attributes. But this is once I started playing football, I got into some of those things that you were talking about, Josh. Like I started to, we got into it was Boys and Girls Club, which was the football, grouping that allowed me to play at in the youth level. I started playing when I was 8. Um, when I got out there, I think it wasn't really obvious until I think about the second practice, and the second practice was when it was like certain little microaggressions that like I've now kind of gotten accustomed to and conditioned to now. Like, you guys are known for that kind of thing, or, you should be used to that, or, And it's things that, now, like, I kind of I dismiss, and I didn't even know what they were then.
Mhm.
So absolutely, to your point, you do. You learn these things, you're aware of these things, you're exposed to these things. But also, I want to touch on something you said. When you're around both areas, you almost get into a point where you don't know where you belong. Hey, did you
Mm.
ever get to that? Like, so when I was in school, I played football, and then football was going great, and then I found out about track. My dad was like, "Hey, you need to run track to make you faster in football." So the track team that I was on was my school team. That was, like, everybody, whatever. But then I went and I tried out for a select track team, and it was all black. Okay. I start, in the first practice, I'm not really doing all that well. I'm getting gobbled up by these kids because there's so many technical aspects about sprinting that people just dismiss every day, and I just didn't get those, and I didn't know those at that time. So the coach sees me, and the kids aren't even interacting with me because when I'm trying to talk to them, I don't sound like them. So they're like laughing at me, like he sounds white, whatever. They're just dismissing everything that I do. So the first practice was just hard, right? So we leave, and I'm not thinking that I'm doing really well because I'm getting just lapped by these kids. So I don't think that I made it, but my coach was able to see, like, he's got an amazing gait, he's got a lot of fluidity, he's got a lot of natural things, these intangible things that you can't train, right? So
Mhm.
I was sent to come back. But that time, being exposed to that team, which was all black, is an awesome experience. But I was exposed to what racism looked like in the reverse. How your own culture can be so hard on you, and not only you, but other people, even you for accepting other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember our first track meet. I had a track meet. I was so happy to be on this team, and everybody knew about them because when you went to these national level meets, they were known, right? So I get to my first meet, and I'm so excited. I bring out a bunch of my schoolmates out, right? They're white, they're Caucasian, whatever. So, I end up running my race. They sit behind me, and the lady who runs the team didn't really say much, and she smiles at them, acknowledges them. They walk off. She's like, "Come here." I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "What did you do?" I said, "I brought my friends." She's like, "Don't you ever bring them to this meet?" I'm like, "What?" But they're my friends. But they're what? They're white. I'm like, wow. I just didn't realize it was like, what? So to your point, it's something that is not really talked about. It's never talked about. It's kind of brushed over, but it's definitely something that I'd see has a lot of impact, and it's definitely helped shape my landscape, and even to where I'm at now. Like, I do, we say celebrity trainer, but I have executives that I train and professionals, and they come from all different shapes and walks of life, all different colors, but I can relate to them, because I know I speak that language, and it doesn't matter what color you are. I know what that language is like.
Yeah, to dive down a little bit more in that rabbit hole, like I think where I see this, and again, I like to do a lot of reflection in the sense of truly reflecting versus being in a depressive state, right? I don't like, because I do a lot of work, right, on my emotional, my spiritual path. Like I do a lot of personal development work, and I know you do as well. And so when I look back on it, I kind of try to boil things down to some simple concepts. And one of the things that I think was important for me, and I think it's important for people to hear, is this idea of perception, right? So
Mhm.
if I looked at my life, if I perceived my life to be from a disadvantaged standpoint, like a scarcity mindset, then woe is me. And now life is happening to
Yes.
me. I got dealt a bad hand, whatever, right? But that it is important to acknowledge that, right? Because we can acknowledge that
Mhm.
all of us have that within us. But then you can also perceive it as, and which I think I did, I perceive it as this was my empowerment. This is how I was powered, right? This fueled me to be the best I could be, because it's like, if I wanted to, I sense these little microaggressions, and I used to always kind of like wipe them off and push them off to the side, thinking like, surely not being racist, right? Like surely not being racist
Mhm,
about what they're
mhm,
saying.
mhm.
But like, I go back to the story when you said these kids came up to you and said, "You're fast, right?" I mean, It's like, come on, man. Like, are you coming up to me because I look like I should be on the football
Hmm.
field? Like, did anybody come up to you and go, "Hey, you're good at math, right?" Probably not.
Right.
Right? Probably not. And,
Right.
but see, that's what fueled me to be the best in my class academically, because I knew that this was happening to me. Everyone expected me to be one of the best athletes, and I was. But when I talked to them more about the fact that I had a perfect attendance from kindergarten all the way till I graduated, they're like, "Wait, what?" Because that's not expected. That's not expected. So that's
Yes.
the extraordinary piece, right? And
Hmm.
I was involved in all kinds of recreations at the school because I enjoyed being at school. And so when someone would try to come to me and like I recall when I was in high school trying to determine when I wanted to go to college to play basketball, I went to loads of different schools to compete. And when I went to the mostly white schools, it was easy for me to stand out. Right. And how I dealt with that was I just walked in with confidence and it's like, oh, I know I'm going to crush them. And then I got humbled. I got humbled because there was a few white boys out there that put it on me. Right.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then I just remember searching within myself when I went to Texas. I went to a junior college in Texas that I wanted to like possibly look at. And when I got to the school, it was nothing but black people. And one of the first things I noticed was that there was bars on the windows of the college, right? Bars on the windows. And I'm like, what? And I get into the gym, and it was nothing but brothers in there, right? Now, remember, I grew up in majority white. I talk white. I'm
Right.
light skinned, right? I get all that beef, right? Oh, who's this yellow bone coming in here, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what you get. And so one of the ways that I was able to break through all that was to be the best person on the court, right? But what
Right.
happens to those that don't have that? So that's why I say that for me was perceived as a fuel. It helped me to be the best I could be because no matter what they can say all they want, but I know I'm gonna bust their ass. And then by the time I
Right.
leave, I got all the respect. So, but not everybody has that opportunity to do that because
Right.
we may not
No.
be in a space to be the best on the field. So then what are you left with? Now you're left with, well, they're racist. I don't like white people. And, because white people don't like me. But there's so much that can be gained from all that. Right. And so I know it's not a question, but I think it's important because I've never talked about this in depth on the show. And I know people out there that are listening to this, they're going to be like, oh, wow. Like you experienced that? Like, yeah, I've had
100%.
I've had a gun pointed at my face saying that you're not gonna date my daughter because she was white. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like
Hmm.
like this is
Hmm.
what I grew up
Hmm.
with, but it's like I can talk about it and then you can hear people say, "Oh, you're dwelling on the past and this and that." Like, no, I've worked through it, But there are times when it gets me. I was just at a play last night and they said the N word because it was reflective on a 1960s time period. But like I have to be honest, like what came up from me was like I kind of laughed it off like I always used to. And then you kind
Hmm.
of go, oh no, it's the period piece. So okay, that kind of makes sense. I'm justifying some of these issues rather than just talking about it. Like, what does that really mean when somebody does that?
Right. Right.
So
Oh my gosh. Mhm. Keep going. No, I was just gonna you just and I hate don't want to be so obtuse to interject, but when you said about hearing that word and really trying to dismiss some of these things and it hits hard, man. It does because the other day I was talking to a good friend of mine, and he was we were talking about giving the difference, or it was a Washington thing, and he was talking about the difference between color and culture, making the distinction, and helping people to understand, like even the fact that Super Bowl, to give it context, the fact that it's a focal point that this Super Bowl this year has been played by two black quarterbacks. The fact that we're even talking about that should just kind of give a lot of credence to just the climate that we're in. Like yes, there's a lot of milestones and we've moved quite a bit, but I think that there's still a cognitive dissonance between where we should be, And I think that's the struggle. And to the point that you're saying, I don't think now, after navigating both landscapes, my closest friends are everything, right? The woman who I profess to be like my mother is like this little, white Italian lady, right? She raised me. So my point, and I think you have it as well, is a lot of it has to do with understanding. Those same kids that I grew up with, when I was in third grade, who were calling me N-word and wouldn't talk to me and all that, are like my best friends now. And and
Mm,
largely it has to do with a lack of understanding. It really, a fear-based mindset. It came from their parents and their parents and their parents before them.
mm,
So, like, I don't think that any of it stems from hate at its core. I just think it's a lack of understanding. I think that the more that you have these conversations, and you're able to, like, find an area of understanding. Like, it's not a right and wrong. I think that's where people struggle. When they're trying to have these conversations about black versus white, and race. It's like, well, that's right or that's wrong. No, it's not about. I just need you to understand. We are
mm,
different at the core level. We're just different. And that doesn't mean bad or good. It just means what it is. And we want to, like, try to tiptoe around that, but I'm like, it is what it is, and what makes us so great, you know.
mm. You know, I don't want to belabor this too much, but and I think right after this we'll go into our Pomodoro break, which will be a perfect sort of segue into another topic. But I know one of the things that we talked about on the phone when we first talked, and I think this is very much worth mentioning because it should allow everyone listening and watching right now. It should allow each of us to kind of check our thoughts about other people, right? And that concept is because your name is Charles, my name is Joshua, right? You speak a certain way, I speak a certain way, right?
Mhm.
And it's happened since I was a little boy, and it still happens today. Let's say like someone is meeting me for the first time over the phone, right? They hear my name is Josh, right? And I mean, it happens less today because you can go to social media, you can Google now and all these things. But I remember being the co-founder of a prominent company, working at and managing a super prominent facility here in New York City. Okay, I won't name names because it's not relevant at this point. But like, I remember when we were first doing some of the first interviews of like the members, because they have a lot of weight in this facility. They wanted to like talk to the founders of the company, right? To kind of figure out like where they fit in, how can they schedule, who are they going to work with, what's your training team like? We want to see pictures. When they wanted to see pictures of our trainers, I thought that was kind of like, I mean, I get it, right? You want to make sure that they look fit, okay? But I quickly realized that they wanted to also see some other things, some other attributes of the person, not just
Mhm.
physical attributes, but they wanted, I mean, they wanted to see a number of things, right? And I never forget my business partner and business manager. His name is Earl. He talks like you and I do. Okay. He looks like you and I do. He's more closer to your skin color than me. Okay. But he and I talk the same. We have names that sound a certain way, right? And the first time that a couple of these members met us in person after talking to us on the phone, conference calls without video, they were mortified. Like they literally could not imagine that Earl and I were the founders of this company that's going to be overseeing their programming, overseeing their health and wellness. They literally came up, a couple of them came up and was like, yeah, I'm here to see Josh and or Earl. And I'm like, hey, I stand up, big smile on my face. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
It's like this pause, and they scan you up and down quickly, and it was like, uh, oh, you're Josh? Yep,
Yep.
I'm Josh, because they expected a Jewish person that looked a certain way, right? And and again, like that's those microaggressions that I know that when you really take that and use that to empower your situation, it's like you said, it's ignorance. And how can you can either attack that and then sort of validate what they already think about you, or you can help educate,
Mhm.
you can help bring down those barriers. So I think that's an important topic for people to just hear because it happens all the time. It happens more than we realize it. We can say all we want, oh, I'm not racist, but we all have prejudices. All of us do.
Right. Mhm.
So
I like what you said about the name one because the name one, Jay, is so easy, man. My name is Charles Flanagan. The minute I say that, people are like, they stop the pot. It's what? It's Charles Flanagan. Oh, nothing about that's black. I'm sorry, so that's your name? So that's your name? No, man, it was the one that I can find. It was the one that sounded sense. It was the one that was going to give my butt the most credibility. Yeah, bro, that's my name. You know what I mean? So, even something that simple, and we just dismiss it. We're dismissed that that is a microaggression, which in turn is kind of racist. And we can go down a rabbit hole, and we got to get to our Pomodoro break, but people, there's always that misconception, that misconstrue between racism and prejudice. I think that we all carry a large degree of prejudice, which, to break down the context of that word, prejudice, prejudge. We prejudge everything. You see that guy, and I think that the prejudging or the prejudice that we have before, it made sense, right? Prejudice at its root is a survival technique. You have to prejudge every situation, at its core. But when you start having, terms like racism, like I don't like that person, I'm not only taking prejudices, but I'm now having hatreds and feelings attached to this person based off race. Come on, it makes no sense. I think that, even, coming up, that was the only thing that I've struggled with racism. I've understood prejudice is as long as I can remember. One of the things that I preach to my clients, and you and I can completely relate, as far as being a celebrity, quote unquote, celebrity trainer, you don't never get a second chance to make a first impression. So like the minute people see you, they're formulating an opinion about you. So what happens the minute you see me? I don't have to say anything. I have something. The minute you see me, I have something that you can't get willed, bequeathed, or gifted. You have to work hard for physique, especially with you and I our age at 43. Man, there's only so much of my genetics are going to give me right now, right? So
Mhm.
when you see somebody in their appearance, it's a huge, you know, uh, you know, insight onto who they are. What they're like. So yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah,
Mm.
it is key.
Bro, it's key. And really quickly, you have a brother. Is he older or younger?
I have, man. So I have two brothers. I have
Okay,
two younger brothers. Yeah, yeah.
two younger brothers. And
Mhm.
just out of curiosity, what are their names?
So Anthony Flanagan and Conrad Burleson. You know,
Okay, okay,
so
okay.
Anthony and Conrad.
So here's one of those ones I get. So my brother's name, his full name is Romario Holland. Okay, Romario, right? This is it's like it's people don't really I guess they kind of expect that, right? These novel names for black kids, right?
Mhm.
And so, like, okay, we'll call him Mario, and Mario, for short, can be known as kind of like an Italian name. So they might ask like that. But then anytime somebody asks me about my brother's name, the next thing out of their mouth usually is so wait, why did your parents call you Josh?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
And it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know. I mean,
You're
maybe they didn't
right.
want to, maybe they couldn't, settle on another name, or maybe they had too many questions about the name Romario and it's not. I don't know, but like that's one of those microaggressions where it's just kind of like, does it matter really? Like, should my name be, Mubaktu? You know what I mean? Like,
But you know what we don't like, the importance of why we need to educate people on why.
oh, cut out for a
Percent,
second.
you know, that they don't like. You say, how did you feel, Jay? You there?
Hey, yeah, sorry, it was cutting out on my end. Were you catching that, Gordon? Did you catch?
Just go ahead and repeat it. I think it was cutting out for both of us.
Yeah, can you just repeat that question, Charles?
You
There's
said
the comment.
microaggressions, and we were talking about them, and I guess my question to you, because people don't realize the importance of why I'm making so much of a point to this, is what they do for the person, the recipient. Why, when a culture or a person feels this, why is it so important that we acknowledge these at the core? We stop these things. You know, and people don't realize, like, it's no different than, a microaggression is no different than a sensitivity point that you'd have with somebody who's heavier set, right? Now, back before the 80s, were nonsense, was everybody was accepted, but it was a little bit more free era, but could get away with saying things that you can't say now. We're very sensitive about people's weight and appearance, which is great. There should be an steady degree of sensitivity, but it also goes for the microaggressions and race and culture. With the Super Bowl going on, with so many different things, there's so many things that people throw out, and I'm just like, why would you say that? That's not okay. That doesn't make me feel okay. But it's still, you get so sensitive about this. Why are we sensitive about this? Even that word, even I don't want to spend too much on it because it'll go down a deep hole, but even the N word, the biggest thing that I get asked from blacks is like, are you okay with somebody white saying it? I get from white people, are you okay with, somebody white saying it, and why on both sides? And, the answer that I always have to that is that we are talking about a word that now has so much meaning and symbolism that it's impacted a whole race of people.
Yeah.
So at some point, do you think that we need to have a collective discussion on the powers and the impact of this word? That people have died for this word. So, you ask me, can I say it? Or you ask me, if you're black, should I say it? Or, I'm gonna give you that same dissertation. I'm gonna say, you do realize that wars have been fought. People have lost their lives, right, over that word.
Mm. Mm.
So
That's heavy, bro. And again, I don't want to go too deep, but like I'm certain that you understand this because I've gotten asked this all my life, right? My response used to always be, no matter if it's a black person saying, a white person saying, or any other race of person saying it, or asking that question, my response to that would be, "But why would you want to say it, knowing the impact that it may have?" Right?
right,
It's like
right.
like, are you so in need of having to say the N word because it makes you feel a certain way, it makes you feel empowered? Like, why? And
Mhm.
also on the flip side of all of that, there's this expectation of a certain response from someone that looks like us to that word. But when you don't give them that result, then it's like, ooh. So, does that mean I have to always practice suppressing my emotion around that? Maybe, right? But it also, there's an opportunity to do what we're doing now, is to educate people on, like, why even say it? If it's like it's almost like you're looking for a fight. If you want to fight, just say you want to fight, you know?
Mhm.
Or let's talk about what's coming up that even makes you want to ask that. Like, if you like to talk about controversial topics, okay, we can talk about controversial topics, but let's just not try to get under my skin because you're trying to feel what I'm feeling. I'll tell you how I'm feeling. I'll tell you how I
Mhm.
feel about that. And sometimes people can't handle that.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
Can't handle the truth.
anyway, right. You can't handle the truth.
Right, yeah.
I know we're
Well,
about to
I
the
go ahead.
Pomodoro, but I'm sorry, and I want to like finish Charles, but something I really want to get both your thoughts on actually, because that this kind of stimulated for me as somebody listening, and I know the audience would like, is just right now there's a huge sort of you're both at the intersection of fitness and culture in a lot of ways, with just being part of the zeitgeist with culture, with your connection with celebrities and such not, but also the intersection of fitness. And right now we're really seeing, especially with young women, but in general, there's a strange sort of paradigm and dynamic between sort of body dysmorphia and healthy lifestyle and sort of shame culture. And I'm curious both your thoughts, like with your clients and what you're seeing, like how you approach that with your clients, and in general, there's just so much controversy of, like, a heavier set woman on Sports Illustrated, is that viewed as healthy now, and or should we not shame, and what's healthy, and all these sort of things right now, and especially with young men, and just this, like, there's an epidemic with young men trying to be healthy and embrace healthy hormones and these things, but also not trying to come off as a toxic male. So there's a lot of these weird sort of like people don't know where to like stand as a young man or a young woman, or like how should I view my body, and how should I like love myself and embrace sexuality but not want to be shamed, like. And I think you're old enough, you've seen enough, and you've seen a lot of these worlds and zeitgeist form and sort of be created, because it wasn't always this way. And we can talk about how it's gotten here, but the bottom line is we're here. And so when we come back, I would really love to hear both your thoughts on like what the F's going on, and sort of how do we navigate this where we're taking the good and leaving the BS?
Well said. Great
Yo,
question, Gordon. And I definitely
right?
think we should let's hop into the Pomodoro break because I think this will give us an opportunity to kind of reset to be able to like really answer that properly. But let's go into the Pomodoro break and then we'll address that, Gordon. Thank you for that. So for those who are new to the show, we do a Pomodoro break to kind of break up the monotony of a sedentary lifestyle or just a certain set of thoughts. And I think this is a perfect time for that. So what is something, Charles, that you could offer in the term in the form of a Pomodoro break for our listeners and viewers?
Two things that I like to do within the terms of Pomodoro break, breaking up the monotony and just giving yourself time is like we've had such a great conversation. It's very, very intense and a lot of emotions come up. Sometimes it's good to just breathe and reflect. So every day I have my mindful moments when, I'll do my box breathing, which yeah, I love that it's been talked about now. Box breathing is essentially, breathing and holding the inhales, the exhales. It's in a basically in a quadrant, right? And what it's designed to do is designed to that vagus nerve, that controls our common reset, functions, calms us down, gets us back into a homeostatic, gets us back into stasis. So do that. Another big thing on top of that, after I do that, is I'll just have a nice little mindful moment, and I'll go on a mental vacation. I'll close my eyes, think of the most tranquil, relaxing spot. Right now, it's Seattle, Washington. It's being back on the pier at Waverly Park, and I'll just take myself back there. I'll take myself
Mm,
back there when everything's peaceful, where everything's calm. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people forget about these places is that you don't actually physically have to be there to get the neurological, response from it. You close your eyes, you think about it, your brain will give you all the similar responses that you need to take you back to that place. So that's
I
it.
love the idea of a mental vacation. I absolutely love that. So thank you for sharing that. Could you just give us a quick example of the box breathing so that people that are listening or watching can join
Yes.
in? And it doesn't have to be long, but like just kind
So
of give
the
people an example.
sure, the box breath, essentially very, very easy. It's going to be an inhalation for 4. At the top of that inhalation, you're going to hold it for 4 counts. After you hold it for 4 counts, it's going to be a slow exhalation for that 4 count. And then at the base of that fourth count, you're going to hold it. You're going to keep that cycle going for 4 times, so that'll complete the box cycle, the breaths. Um, but yeah, that's essentially it. And after
Exhale
the
through
four
the mouth or
cycles,
nose?
eh, nose.
Okay.
I'm all about the nose.
Yeah.
Perfect. So let's do that.
So
Let's do that. Just I think it's worth doing because again, people watching at home and listening, if you're listening and you're driving, please pull over. Don't do this while you're driving, right? But let's just go over this really quick because I think it's important. If you want to skip, 30 seconds forward to skip this part, feel free to do so. But like join in with us because I think this will be important for both of us to continue this wonderful conversation.
okay, so we're all going to start. We're gonna go inhale for 4 count. Okay, inhale 1,000. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold. I always love doing that. It's a really nice
Ooh.
reset.
Ooh. Now, I just want to give a couple tips here and there because again,
You're a
being
breathwork tactician. I love.
oh,
Go ahead, please.
no, I love this, and you're a practitioner as well, so we both do this, and I want people to understand that there's a variety of ways of to do this, right? And you may have heard a slight difference in maybe how he was doing it because he was having to speak, Charles, that is. And I know some people aren't able to breathe entirely through the nose because of certain hardware issues and whatnot. And like sometimes I like to do inhale through the nose and notice that in order to get to a 4-second inhale, sometimes it's very difficult, which means you either don't get to the 4 seconds or you have to force yourself to breathe soft. So I
Yeah,
say
that's
low and slow, right?
yeah.
Low and slow to get to that
Yes.
4 seconds. That's important. And try to do it as much as you can nasally. And then you hold your breath. And then you have the choice of either exhaling nasally or exhaling through pursed lips or closed teeth. And what that's doing is trying to moderate the flow of the air, which helps to build up this lung capacity, which is what we're ultimately trying to work on as well, right? To get this autonomic response, but also to build our lung capacity. And if you can do this for a period of time, not only do you feel this sort of rest and digest, you get to this parasympathetic state through the nervous system, but you also are working on your lung capacity. So it should be like this little bit of a challenge. If you can't find yourself getting to 4 seconds, think, am I breathing too hard through the nose? Or do
Mhm.
I really have to work on, my breath? And chances are you have to work on your breath.
Yeah, I had to adjust. I started off too intense, and then I'm like, all right, I think I need to breathe a lot lower and slower. And the sensation, yeah, well, and the sensation also, and I really want to get your thoughts on that question before this, but also as another follow up, I think that with this, you guys would both be good to speak on is, and this would be a good transition to cannabis is the sensation you feel, especially that specific type of breath technique, is very similar to a mild or semi mild hit of cannabis. And I wonder if you guys looked into the science of is it the similar or the same neurological things going on? I know you get natural dopamines and things from breathing, but how correlated or similar is that? And is that any bridge to how you got into cannabis through breathing at all?
Well, great question. And and again, I think we can easily go down any path that you want with this, Charles. I'm happy to mention kind of my thoughts on that, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that if you have any insight.
Well, they've been doing a lot of studies lately, and they've been talking about what the thing with the cannabinoids is. It's a pain suppression. That's the biggest impact that they love about cannabis is the cannabinoids suppress pain. So that feeling that you're likening that to when you have the breath work is that's also the same feeling that you have when you're having that breath suppressing the pain. It's releasing all these endorphins that you get with the cannabinoids. Is that about the same thing you were liking it to, Josh?
Absolutely, and I would throw another on top of that, which is the relaxant effect, right? So,
Mhm, mhm.
it's like when we do the breath with or without cannabis, the breath work, like there's also this sense of our body relaxing, right? Like a lot of people, like you said, you take it for pain because it helps to relax our musculature, our nervous system, right? And you can achieve that through breath. You can achieve that through cannabis, right? And certainly certain forms of it, but you can also certainly achieve that with both. And so just me closing my eyes while being slightly elevated at this moment and doing that breath work, I literally like was not here. You know what I mean? I'm like I was on a mental vacation as you put it. And I think
Yes.
that's the power of it, right? Because sometimes we're so amped up on life and we're so attached to our pain sometimes that we need to be just kind of shifted away from that. Like the awareness
Mm.
shift. My book.
Mhm.
It's a nice little plug there.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Which we do talk about cannabis in the book, by the way. So, but anyway, that was a great question, Gordon. And I think now is a good segue into the other question that he was talking about, which I do think is very important, like kind of like the state of affairs throughout the world today in terms of, the zeitgeist. And,
Mhm.
it's like everyone wants to kind of label others, and everyone is also searching for a tribe or community to be a
Mhm.
part of. I don't
Mhm.
think that's inherently wrong,
Mhm.
But when you're trying to do it in this prejudicial way, the way you talked about, because we do have to prejudge, but when you do it in this way that's like, well, I need to ask you this question so I can put you in a box, like that's the part that I don't see that's correct. That's the part that I don't like. But if you want to find a community of like-minded people because they're healthy, or because you aspire to be like them, or you think that they can add to the collective, that's the part that I do like, right? So
Mm.
what are your thoughts on it, Charles?
Oh no, I think you're right. And the thing about it is, the pros, kind of to your point, is I love the inclusion. I love how, there's so many different groups or settings that I wouldn't have seen, that are now inclusive in the space. Like, let's look at the fact of, the space that you and I both come from, modeling and celebrity training. And in modeling, there was no such thing as plus size models. There was only one size, and that was size
Mm.
zero, or that was, whatever. And so now to see, plus size models, to see shorter stature models, and to see just an array of different people is crazy to me, because by definition, just a model is somebody that just displays, right? And it's good and bad. Coming from, I guess, we talked about terms like toxic masculinity, coming from the 80s, which was a very male toxic era. Like, it was big on being a certain way, being a male, and now, and speaking a certain way, and presenting a certain way, being the macho tough guy, that was big. Whereas now it's not so much, like, it's you're okay. It's okay to express, be emotionally expressive, and have all this dynamic. It wasn't that way. And I think the only concern that I have, me personally, I think, we've lost sight of some of the core, for lack of better words, traits that I think, make a male. With all this inclusion, I think that also with a lot of this inclusion, there's no benchmark, or there's no yardstick, right? So, being a fitness model when I was coming up, it was tough. In fitness modeling, you were either a bodybuilder, which meant you were just this big, huge beast, or you were like, just an aesthetic, just, god. And it took a lot, and to get on the cover of these magazines, what you had to do, I mean, you had to be the top the top. So now, when I see these different platforms of, TikTok, and I see these models, and how these influencers, that's cool. It's great. But, again, the tough thing about that is now everybody thinks they can do that, right? It's so inclusive that now there's no benchmark or yardstick, and everybody can do it whenever they want to. Very similar to, even, and this will be super offensive, to training. Like, the training thing, I have a hard time in certain aspects of inclusion, because I think there should be a benchmark. So, say, for instance, I tell my lady this all the time. If you and I were going down the uh, avenue of personal finance, or any kind of finance, would you want me to be bankrupt? You wouldn't trust me. You wouldn't let me borrow your money. You wouldn't let me lend your money if I was a bankrupt financial planner, or whatever the fact. But I don't understand the disconnect with training. Like, I see so many out of shape, heavier personal trainers, and I don't understand that. Like, whether or not you may be this brilliant guy and you understand training, you're just not applying the data. So the fact that you're overweight and your training is a very weird thing to me. I don't understand that. So,
Oh,
you know,
okay. So now this is a great topic, and again, I'll go back to my childhood. I'll go back to because a lot of this is in my book, actually, or I should say, some of this is in my book. And I wanted to try to paint a picture of how I was raised, so that people could understand better how I think the way I think. And in
mhm.
terms of these microaggressions, going back to that, but also applying that to what your point that you just brought up is, so my father was the chief of police of my hometown, and he was the sensei of the only martial arts school in our region. And he was an EMT, and to me, he was my hero, and still is, right? But here's the kicker. My dad is morbidly obese, right? Morbidly obese,
Right.
right? And he wasn't as big as he got, like, a year ago, but a year ago, or a little over a year ago, he was at 507 pounds when he got checked into the hospital because he fell, right? Now,
Oh, geez.
this is someone that would go, like, I mean, he would go to work and live a normal life, but I say normal life, right? It's normal probably in the Midwest now in today's world because everybody's obese, right? And so it's just kind
Mhm,
of a little
mhm.
bit more accepted. But to your point about this, bankrupt financial advisor, my dad was literally the bankrupt financial advisor. I mean, not quite, but right, but he was the obese martial arts instructor, right? And he had my brother and I, his sons, sort of represent him because we were number one and number two in the state, and we knocked
Right.
every barrier down, right? But my brother and I always were faced with, hey, I thought your dad was like the sensei. I thought he was like the kung fu guy, like, and that's it. That's all they would say. But we knew what that was about, right? Kids would make fun of my brother and I because we had this car. We grew up pretty poor, right? But we had this old brown car, right? It was like a Pontiac Cutlass, I think it was, right? It was old, and it was the brown car that everyone knew that the smoke was coming out of the back of it, and it's like you knew we were in town because if we were going somewhere because there would be smoke, right? But not only that, people would laugh at us because when we would drive off, they would all be pointing because my dad's side of the car was always lower to the ground than the side that we were on,
Jeez,
right? And I learned,
bro.
like, without even really, I'm just now for the first time realizing that I did this, but I would sit on the side that my brother would sit on, like whether he was in the front or I was in the front, we would just intuitively sit on the other side to try to balance it out.
Mhm.
Imagine that, right? Imagine that. And so I have grown up with a little bit more empathy about those that maybe aren't doing what you say, like that, what you brought up, which is like they should be walking the walk, talking the talk.
Mhm,
Hence why I call this show Simply Walk the Talk. And I get asked all the time, do you think you are where you are today in your career because of your family, because of your dad particularly? And I say,
mhm.
certainly, certainly, right? Because, I have an example of where it can go. He to this day he's in a acute care facility, right? It's essentially a nursing home because he got to the point where his weight got so out of control that he can't live a normal life. And I know the pain that other people, when they first hear that, they go, "Wait, your dad is morbidly
Mhm.
obese? How?" And so I've
Right.
had the opportunity to educate people in that it's not just about overeating. There's so much that goes into that. And so
Oh my
again,
gosh.
it allows me to bring that up. And I'm not giving a pass for anybody who's in a training space that is overweight, not giving a pass for
Mhm.
that, or not giving a pass to the person who's a dentist who has bad teeth. But at least it allowed me to kind of go, I can empathize with you for a moment. And then I
Mhm.
ask those questions a little bit deeper, especially as a health coach. Like, how did we get here? Can we
Mhm.
address that?
Mhm.
Because I know the pain that they might be going through, because I know the pain my dad goes through, because I know the pain I went through, you know?
Right. No,
Yeah.
and again, I want to thank you so much for sharing that, and it's that's definitely tough, man. And very transparent. Like, this is by no means am I fat shaming or shaming anybody that's heavier. Um, I have clients, I have friends, and using, I guess, something that's very similar is you had your dad that was heavier, right? And that was the battle that you overcame. You didn't carry that generational curse, right?
Mm,
So mine was addiction, alcoholism. My dad wasn't heavier, right? But what I saw was, drinking and things like that. Addiction was mine. So, and I only say this to say that because of, we went back into how did my upbringing shape and form me, is I never had any margin to be anything less than perfect. The way I talked, the way I presented, everybody's like, man, you're so this, you're so the oration, my even the pacing of how I speak. Do you know how many times I listen to myself, or I go over and over, or I have somebody else critique, and it's been because I've gone to castings, or I've had interviews, and it's been so different than anybody else. So, I don't say that to say that I'm just bashing people. I'm just saying that in my experience, it just
mhm.
makes it so much easier. It just makes it. I always this big guy. I was what you call, quote unquote, a hard gainer. So for me to put on weight, what that means is it's hard to put on weight. For me to put on weight, it requires a lot. So again, it's another misconception. People get the idea that what I am is because of ego, and it's not. It's because of sickness. Like I work out incessantly, I do what I do incessantly because I'm always thinking that I'm never enough. It has nothing to do with I gotta look good or I gotta feel good. No, no, no. It's because I never feel like I'm enough. Like I'll go in the mirror, I'm body dysmorphic to the nth degree. So this is not a result of ego or anything like that. So there's two prongs, right? But
Wow.
I say this because when I do, with all the different challenges that you have in this world, with people being so dismissive and people wanting to judge and stigmatize, you look at me and you're like, oh, well, that guy's quasi put together, so I don't have to deal with some of those other hurdles. That's the one thing that I try to impart with those people, like
Mm,
you have biohacker on your shirt. That was one of the other things that really kind of connected me to you, is because there's a lot of people that don't know what that is. And I read your books, like I've seen the podcast and I'm like, yo, man, this guy is it, from your breath work, to the yoga, to the everything, to martial arts. Like what that means is somebody that's understood their body and really wanting to see what it's capable of. And I'm like, yo, Josh, that's that guy. And a lot of people in our culture don't even understand what that means, that you're a biohacker. What does that mean? Well, you live day to day in this body, or and like no different than a car, right? I have friends who have high performance cars. You can drive your car every day and never see what it's capable of. I can grab a NASCAR driver and show you things that car you never even thought that car could do. That's the same thing with the human body. I think a lot of people are walking around every day just going, just through the monotony of life, not really pushing their body to the limits. When you see myself and myself, you see you and you hear you, you can tell that this is somebody who's really putting every intent and energy into their body, into what it's capable of. So yeah, I know that went off on a tenor on where we're going, but that was
mm,
my only perfection to why I say that, on how the aesthetic appearance has to be for a trainer. Like I really see the benefits and the impacts, because correlation between exercise and mental health. Like I've suffered from depression, anxiety my whole life. My whole life. There's a book I know you've read it. Dr. Rattay has it. It's called Spark, and it's about exercise and mental health. And it was one of the books that, when I was at the thralls of my addiction, kind of going through it, it really helped me out. It basically talks about how exercise can really reverse a depressive state. So when I see these guys and I know how you know when you're overweight and how it starts to compound, that's right. Yeah, that's it. That's the one. That's the one.
that's it.
It's an
Yeah.
amazing book, and it's not anecdotal at all. The guy, they have shunned this guy. There's been controversy over this book because you know uh, studied it in schools. Just about every practitioner in our space, the biohackers, we've all read this book, or parsed through it. But if you want to know how to cure yourself of depression and any form of dis-ease through exercise, game changing, game
Mm,
changing.
mm. Thank you for sharing that, man. And it's I resonate with you so much on so many different levels, and I'm certain that we're gonna have to have you back on the show, and just because there's just so much we can talk about. Because like specifically now, I we really haven't even gotten into the thralls of you as a trainer. We haven't gotten into any major discussion about cannabis. I love that you talk about mental health, because I talk about mental health. In fact, I work with a group called Reconstruction Unlimited, and the idea there is to provide my support as a holistic health coach or a health optimization coach, and how that relates to any sort of other like addictions or behavioral issues. And so all of that is very important to me, and I think is it's great that we both speak on that same level. But let's talk about cannabis, because I know we're both advocates of it. And I know one of the main things we related to when we first had our discussion, that first time on the phone, is we talked about the idea of being elevated versus being high, or versus being
Mhm.
stoned. In fact, I myself, and I know I'm not the same as this, but like even the term cannabis for me it makes it more like it's in higher regard when I use the term cannabis versus weed versus pot, right? Because just like being
Mhm.
identified or labeled as the black guy that should be an athlete, right? That's kind of what I think is happening in the space of plant medicine, right? It's like when you call it weed, you call it pot, you automatically associate that to the negative connotation, right? So I try to separate that even just for my own language, right? And kind of back to that idea around the N word, right?
Mhm.
Like if I don't want that vernacular in my world, then I myself don't use it, right? And then I kind of explain the impacts of what it's like with those who do use that in my space. So same thing with cannabis, right? If everybody is saying pot and weed in my orbit, then it's like, okay, let's have a discussion about what we're actually doing here, right? Let's have the proper set and setting
Mhm.
so that we can do what we're doing, right? Like I know you talk about using this medicinally, but let's kind of unpack this discussion around cannabis because you are a cannabis consultant and I know we relate.
Yeah, no, man, and there's so many applications that cannabis has. And I think, the biggest thing that I'm trying to do is, open up the conversation, change the paradigm and a lot of the stigma behind it, and to show people what this plant that has been around for ions, helping people for ions, never killed anybody ever, and what it can really do, what it can really do, and what it, and what it should be doing. So, to go back to, what you said, yes, I'm elevated as well too. I let people know, I suffer from depression, anxiety. Without cannabis, I wouldn't be able to talk to you.
Mm,
You know,
mm,
um, there's a lot of repetitive thoughts, and there's a lot of things that I'm always consistently challenged with. And people wonder, well, how would you even smoke and talk? Because I couldn't even do that. Well, right now with me consuming, it allows me to compartmentalize all those thoughts. Like right now, as I'm thinking of you, as I hear you talk, I'm able to parse through all the thoughts and everything, and I'm able to give you whatever this is that I'm saying that sounds like words, right? That sounds like a sentence. Opposed to when I'm not, man, it's all so much. The world seems so big, and you and I both talk about mental health dis-ease, and what cannabis does is being, who we are, and a lot of the upbringings, all of our lives are different, right? Your experiences color and shape, who you are. Some of us can't deal with that. Some of us struggle with that. And me, it was never something that it was gonna take a lot more academic way to palliate that condition. You know,
mm,
and pills wasn't it. It was never gonna be it. Pills completely change everything about who I am. Um, and the thing about me is, growing up in the conventional area that I grew up in, I never wanted to do drugs ever. I didn't start consuming cannabis, becoming a plant advocate until the last 4 years, and it was after a lot of research and, guidance from the right people. So for me, why I think the understanding of cannabis is important is because the world right now is going through a lot. There's a lot of ego out there, and it really does. And on my last podcast, I went off on this diatribe. There's this little soundbite, but it suppresses a lot of the ego, and the ego is the things that we're connected or attached to that we think are important, and they're really not. Males more often than not suffer from ego. Believing in things. I am this. I have this, or I should be this. It's ego. And what cannabis does is it shows you that a lot of those things are important. You know,
mm,
it allows us to have healthy, unemotional based conversations. That's the other thing about it is a lot of times when you have these other substances, and I want to use alcohol. Because I see alcohol heavily sourced, and everybody talks about alcohol, and that to me is a drug. But when you have alcohol, the minute you drink it, you disconnect. Your inhibitions are thrown away. That's what they say. It allows you to throw away your inhibitions. With cannabis, it's completely different. With cannabis, it's not a disconnect; it's an absolute connect of everything. and everything you feel. Like I never decided to come home and smoke because I want to disconnect, but I can always remember being an alcoholic and being a drug addict of wanting to pop a pill or having a drink, so I just didn't have to feel anymore. You know,
Ooh.
um, Bro, and another thing I talk to people, they're like, I was on that last one with Sean, and I was hit. I knew that I wanted to talk about cannabis, and I knew I was going to be berated because they were like, "Yeah, it sounds like you're doing this. What about this?" And I'm like, how do you know if you're not becoming addicted to cannabis, or it's not becoming your new addiction? And I'm like, okay, that's great. I think you have to look at why I'm using this. It has to be the intent. So, am I using this with the intent to check out, or am I using this with the intent to check in? If what you're using it for is because you need to disconnect, you can't handle what you're doing, absolutely. I think you're addicted, and I think that cannabis is probably not the thing for you.
Mm.
But if you're using it because it allows you to connect, whether you're that guy, you have that workout session, man, and you want to hit your goals. You know what? A lot of my guys, you're karate, I have guys, a lot of my guys who are in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I can't say some of the other names, but they roll, bro, on it. And they're like, if you've ever rolled and consumed at the same time, a lot of these big MMA guys that you see, if you only knew what some of these guys consumed, and I'm not talking about drugs, I'm talking about the fact that you and I can always do it. I love the way that you do it, and it helps you connect with other modalities. Have you ever consumed, and done yoga sessions, or even with your meditation, Josh?
Well, this is a great point, and yes, so I completely agree with you. I do a variety of sports activities and movements, right? And so, um, because I have I've found my way, right? And I want to, before I continue this point, I want to say to people, there's been at least two other podcast episodes that we've done on this show that I can recall. One is episode 137 with Lynn May,
Yeah,
and the other is 144, I believe, with Dr. Ted Achikoso. Both of those episodes we discussed at like in depth the sort of like the world of cannabis, at least from their perspectives and my perspectives. And one of the things that I made sure to bring about in that conversation, and anytime there's a conversation around cannabis or plant medicine, is is this idea of it's not just one thing, right? It's not. So for instance, when someone knows that I'm an advocate for cannabis, they'll say to me, yeah, like cannabis is not for me. And then I go, oh, interesting that you would say that, like what happened? Can you explain a little bit further? Well, I mean, everyone has, or a lot of people have the story of taking edibles, too many edibles, or
right.
hitting the blunt too much from someone that was at the
Mhm.
party and this and that. And it's like I always kind of throw this idea back at them and say, okay, what if I sat here and told you, you know what? I tried the whole food thing, but food is not for me, right? Or you know what? I tried the whole vitamins thing. Vitamins aren't for me. That's how
Right.
that's what I hear when they say that. Because to me, what it should do when I give you that response back, it should make you think, well, no, I'm not saying that all food it doesn't agree with me, but like gluten doesn't agree with me. Oh, so now we're talking about a certain subset of food. So then you're saying
Yes.
that a certain form of cannabis may not be good for you, a certain profile, a breakdown, a ratio. Like I mean, we've got edibles, we've got, flour, we've got drinks, tinctures, ointments. So like what part of it is not for you,
Mm,
right? And
right.
then have you tried all of the other forms? And are you, and sometimes these are the same people who go to the store and get over the counter medications that are worse. They are the
Right.
same ones who medicate with alcohol, right?
Right.
Like, you know what? I prefer to have my glass of wine. It's like the point that you brought up, which was, do you check in or do you check out? I absolutely love that. And I'm going to borrow that because it's either you're checking in or you're checking out. And
Mhm.
I'm from this camp of like, I know exactly what strains I like. I know what ratios I like. I know the best times to take it. Most of the time, I'm always taking it before I do one of these podcasts. I certainly did today, right? And and then it's like when people understand that, they go, oh. So sometimes, and I don't want to be the one here to force anyone to try it, but I do say, just like everything else, sometimes you just got to try it and you need to learn how to titrate up. Like, I would never ask someone to go from a regular shod shoe into a barefoot shoe from day one to day two, because we know you need to progressively load the system, right? If you've been wearing, a regular shoe all your life, and then you find a video on YouTube or on Instagram that shows that barefoot training is the best way to go for your foot and things like that, you might hurt yourself if you immediately go to that. And that happened to me, right? But
It
here I
happened to
am
me.
now, right? Right?
I know that.
Right? But here I am now saying that, like, well, I could have 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I could have said, oh, barefoot shoes aren't for me. This is what a lot of people say to me, right? So then I go, well, have you tried just barefoot? Because that's your body. And you can't say that being barefoot is not for you, because that's how we were born. You weren't born with shoes,
Man.
right? So this is how I kind of break through all of the stigmas around the idea of cannabis. And then again, now we're not talking about just cannabis. We're talking about your thought process. We're talking about how do you elevate, and this is why I like to call it elevated.
Man. Yep. 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 Yep.
So I know.
But go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, like, I wanted to get that piece out there, and then I'll quickly address the how I use it during certain activities, because I know you want to touch on some of this as well.
Yes.
The first time that I ever tried cannabis with basketball was one of the most profound experiences that has ever happened to me in terms of fitness and cannabis use. Okay. Now, I went my whole high school and the beginning of college without drinking alcohol. So I didn't drink alcohol until I was 21. I didn't consume cannabis until I was 24, right? And I missed out on a lot of all of that. Now, I say missed out as in, whether that's good or bad, right? Now, there was most of my friends and athletes and like teammates that were on alcohol and on cannabis throughout my entire career. And one of the best athletes in college that I had ever been, he was actually my roommate. He was an All-American basketball player. He smoked every day. Now, back then, this was really unheard of, right? I wasn't near what I know now about health and wellness in general, but certainly back then, I mean, I couldn't stand this dude, right? Because he was also smoking in our apartment, and I was a roommate
Hmm.
with him, But this dude was jacked. He was one of the best athletes, and I thought to myself, what would he be like if he didn't smoke? I just thought it was so negative. Like, man, he would be incredible. He would be in the NBA if he didn't smoke. But now that I know what I know, I think back to, he had an advantage, man. That's like a performance enhancing drug, right? Performance enhancing supplement, right? And so I tried it for the first time playing basketball, and it was like the Matrix, bro. It was literally like the Matrix. Like I could see plays formulating. I never forget, and I've talked about this on a podcast before, but I remember I was a little bit like all over the place in my head when I was on the basketball court, right?
Mm.
I played at a very high level, and I would always be like, okay, I got to remember this play, because I was playing point guard and shooting guard, and I need to remember plays and defenses. I need to know my own plays. I need to be able to call them out, tell each person in their position, plus my own position, where they need to be if they were messed up. I
Yep.
also need to be able to read the defense and where they are, and if there's any, openings here and there. All these things was going on, and my assistant coach at the time, he was a former NBA basketball player. He played for the Chicago Bulls. Okay. He came to me one day and he grabbed me by my jersey. He was like, boy, you need to calm your ass down. You need to calm your ass down. He was like, go out there and play. And I'm like, okay, coach, okay. Oh, that made it worse. That didn't make it better. That made it worse. Right?
Down.
Right. And so now, so I'm out there, I'm playing. He benches me. Right. And he sits me down, and he was like, hey, boy, you need to go smoke a blunt or something. Right.
Yeah.
Mind you, he was a cannabis advocate, but like back then you can't talk about that. But we all knew he actually ended up losing his job because he smoked, right? He lost that job because he smoked. But it was interesting because I don't agree with the way that he did it, but now I understand what he means, because he was just trying to
Right.
tell me like, hey, there's something out there for you that can maybe slow down what's happening in the firing of those synapses in your brain. And when I saw this basketball game open up in my adult years, I thought, oh, I'm going to play every game elevated. And I mean, it's like my
Mm,
game completely transformed. And I've rolled.
mm.
'Cause I do BJJ. Um, Now I will say this: I ran the New York City Marathon on it, and that's something you should do. Oh, no. But anyway, let's kind of go back into your thoughts, because I'm going on a tangent now. It's easy for me to do. Um, yeah, I do love the component of being able to check in while doing physical activities, for sure.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things too. I tell people like you hear about Hindu Kush. Some cannabis names have like absolutely no origin. They're just whatever. But some of them have origin, like Hindu Kush. The Sherpas used to use that. They're smaller people. They just sit up these mountains. They'd have heavy packs on on their back. On their back. Anybody knows if you do any kind of climbing or you do anything, any kind of endurance types, sport, you have your body produces what's called lactate. Lactate is the byproduct. That's that stress byproduct, that waste product. That's when your body feels tight. When you're uh, maxing out, and you feel that load, or you're in their higher rep range, and you feel that you can't do them, or you're in a 400. That lactate is what your body produces. Um, what some strains do is allows you to suppress that lactate production. Your body doesn't feel the stress and the strain that you normally would feel, when you're not in an elevated state. You talked about rolling, or I would always do my mitt work. I box, and mitt work and pad work, like you said, the Matrix. That is exactly the way I would describe it. You feel like Neo when the bullets are coming at you. I mean, everything, the way you can move, yeah, everything's in slow motion. Everything slows down. I'm laughing at what you said about your guy. There was a friend that I had. I hope it wasn't the same brother, but that I had that was just like that. You know what I mean? He smoked constantly, and dude was rocked up. He looked like a bodybuilder when we were in junior high. He was the fastest dude. He was the strongest. He wrestled. He played baseball. He ran track, and he played football. And he smoked all the time. And he was a 4 point student. And we were like, yo, if this guy didn't smoke a quarter of the time, he would be brilliant. And it was because he smoked why he was brilliant. What people don't understand, like theogens and as far as plant medicine right now, I keep telling people, they're like, well, you microdose, or you take shrooms or mushrooms. I'm like, yeah, all of that big boost that happened in Silicon Valley, Steve Jobs, all those
Yeah.
guys, it was all fueled off of psilocybin. So I have a bunch of people who don't going back to your point, I don't want to do it because I feel like I lose control, or I can't control. It's not about that. I think that when you surrender that part of the control, to a lot of people, that's when the gains come. No different than anything else. Um, the bad experiences, here's something, me being in the space. There's a product called Udo, and I'm gonna see if I can find it. I don't know if the lady makes it, but if the product's not available, if you ever have a heavy dose of edibles and you don't know how to titrate that, or it's too much, with alcohol, if you drink too much, you're going down that hole. You either get alcohol poisoning or you go to the hospital. Okay. With cannabis, it's horrible, right? And you'll feel miserable. But the thing that's so awesome is you'll never die. To offset that, if the feelings are ever too much, what I would ask you guys to do is go to a dispensary and you can get CBD. CBD helps titrate a lot of the psychedelic effects, like helps marginalize them. So I guess it'd be almost like having alcohol and somebody saying getting some caffeine to kind of help curb, the feelings. But on the whole, that only happens with edibles, and it's because it's so hard to really dose them accurately or get the dispersal of the cannabis, the cannabinoids in the product. So other than that, I tell people, for first time consumers, grab a joint, blunt, or whatever smoke you can. I'm not, advocate, but I am. You can get a little puff and you can kind of feel the effects. And if they're too much, you can always back it off. But with the edible, man, the edible is a tough thing. It's like, I guess I would liken this to, you can't go on a roller coaster, get up at the top of the thing and decide, when you're at the top, yo, I can't I don't want this. I want to get off this ride. That's what it's like, an edible. Opposed to when you smoke the joint, like it's being in the line. seeing the ride and being like, yo, that's wild. I'm out.
Right,
That's what the CBD does, right? It's like,
right.
okay, yo, this is crazy. We're in the line, man. We're about to do it. You feel all pumped up, but then the CBD makes sure you don't have to get on the ride. You know what I mean? So you're still in the line. You're still
Absolutely.
getting the effect. You're still with everybody. That's the best analogy that I would use.
And thank you for sharing that. And again, in both of those episodes I mentioned before, that we did on this show, I talked about that very component because it's something that I've experienced. Right, most people, or let's say a lot of people, have this "what if I take too much" moment. Right, I've certainly been there, and I never wanted to be back there. And so now what I do is kind of like having a at-home first aid kit. Part of my toolkit for anything is there's a handful of things I always keep around, but I always keep around a very potent, concentrated tincture and nasal spray, right? Because we're talking about fast delivery of pure CBD, right? And the reason for
Mhm.
that is because if anyone's ever in my presence, or even myself, if you ever get a little bit too much on an edible, like, hey, you know what? Try this because I know what you might be going through. Try this. This can
Mhm.
help kind of cut it, so to speak, or titrate it, as you say. And the other thing too is just like everything has sort of a consequence. We have to understand that. And so when you sort of refine this, this plant, this beautiful plant that came the way it was from nature, and you make it into an edible and things like that, we should kind of understand and expect some level of a consequence from that, right? You can obviously benefit from the rewards of sort of getting into said state that you want to get into, but you also have to understand that there may be some consequences. It's not that it's supposed to be always amazing, but it can be if you do it right, right? And so one of the things I like to do is consume with like a vaporizer, and not the vaporizer you see on the street when people blow these
Mhm.
big clouds of smoke, but like proper ceramic chambers where it heats it to a certain temperature. I myself use a volcano. I also have I like to use like a certain vape pen that is all like ceramic pieces, and it allows me to set the temperature to warm the cannabis up just to a certain point. And I also like to use rosin from time to time because it doesn't use a chemical extract
Mm.
to make the substance, because I don't want to also be consuming like these chemicals while I'm ingesting it as well, because I have to consider, like, is that also giving me a certain head state or body state, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. In the
So
space right now, it's a heavily debated topic.
yeah, 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 and again, it just goes back to that topic of it's not just one thing. It's not just weed. It's not just this is not for me. Well, like, how are you taking it? Why are you taking that way? Have you tried this way? And then like if you ultimately decide that it's not for you, that's fine. But what are you replacing with that? Because if you're replacing it with something else that's addictive, like that's truly addictive, now we got a problem. Now we got a problem. So
Yes.
I feel like we could talk so much about cannabis, and maybe we will do another
Man.
episode on this. Um, I now want to make sure before we wrap up, I want to make sure that we talk about um, a little bit more of the fitness side of what you do, because I know that's a big part of who you are. You're also a trainer. I respect what you put out. I mean, you have some of the best content that I've seen. I mean, it's really inspiring to see your content, and so that in itself is very motivational. So I suggest everyone to go and check out his page, and Gordon will make sure and provide all the links for that. But let's talk about your fitness journey and how that has also helped you throughout your life of your journey of optimal health and wellness.
Yeah, no, my fitness journey, man, it is like, and I think that we talked about this, and you and I are very similar in that respect, the biohacking space. Um, you only get one body, you only get one of these. And, I kind of liken myself to a high performance machine, right? I want to be able to get everything out of my body that it's capable of. And what my training and all my modalities, my principles are being able to help everybody do that. You know, at the end of this life, you want to look at it with fulfillment, so Also with extensions on that came, the plant medicine and understanding more about, the brain impacts. But yeah, the profile. Thank you for that. It's tough, man. I struggle a lot. I call my profile the Matrix. I call it myself the girl in the red dress. It's enticing. It's alluring. It gets people to look in. Oh my God, he looks so amazing. And then when you talk to me, you're able to see, the blue pill. You're able to see the reality, of everything. Like, yes, there's hard work, man. Like to get to this physique, to do what I did, man. It took more. I've been weight training or strength training since I was 8. So you know how your dad was the martial arts instructor. My dad saw me over super like ADHD kind of kid.
Hmm.
I fought a lot. So my dad didn't know martial arts, and I don't know if it would have been the best to teach me, but he did teach me how to weight train. He taught me how to weight train and protect myself. So I'd say the best thing for somebody, you want to feel good about yourself, you give somebody some muscles. It's the best way to give anybody who has low self-worth, self-respect. So it really has, man. I've struggled with a lot of different things, but one of the things that's helped keep it all together is, how I've kind of kept myself together and my look on, health and well-being. Again, it's my whole drive is to be able to impart that to anybody and everybody, show people what it's capable of.
And to this day, you still are training people, and I think if I remember seeing correctly, like you're working on creating a facility that ends up being like a total wellness facility and things like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do. Like, again, we're still in the what I would love to do at one point. I'd love to be like a wellness director or some kind of trainer for a sports team, but I would love to get opioids out of the locker rooms, get everybody away from that, get a more holistic approach to how people see training, to also get people to understand the incorporation between plants, and the medicine behind that. Because even another approach, when people stop training, you'll pop these NSAIDs, these anti-inflammatories. All those have impact. Cannabis is the only thing that it's an anti-inflammatory, it doesn't have that. So yeah, no, it is, man, to have a clinic, to be able to impart all those different modalities on a larger scale.
Mm. Yeah, I can visualize um, what you said, because I know you a bit better now, and I can visualize like possibly how you would carry it out. But I also visualize the person who doesn't know you, or who probably is in this state of like, oh man, like, is this going to be a dispensary where we can also lift weights? Nah, it's not going to be like that. I can promise you that, right? Because
Yeah.
like, it needs to be the right set and setting, and we want to treat this as such. Because nowadays, like, if you want to just go party, right? You can go and drink, you can go and smoke, you can pop, you can do mushrooms, and you can do all these things. But like, what we're trying to do is elevate the awareness around what is available. And like you said, like that high powered car, how can you tweak that? You're not going to take this high powered car to the dude down the street. I promise you, you're not going to take your Ferrari to homeboy around the corner. So why would
Mm,
you go around
mm.
the corner to go and get something that's supposed to take you to the next level? You know?
100%. Well, whenever anybody has challenges, and to go back to the dispensary, the gym center, I tell them, I said, the fastest man on land and the fastest man on water, they both were heavy consumers, Michael Phelps and Usain Bolt. So I don't even have to say anything else.
Mm.
If we can even go to strength, we can go to weight training. Like my man who passed away, rest in peace, from West Coast Barbell. Everybody that I know in the space, it's the secret that nobody talks about that needs to be talked about. So what happens when you combine that? What happens when you have a center that works with all those modalities but understands how to dose with them? So it will be a very heavily scienced, guys such as yourself, guys like myself. You showed the BJ pins, but practitioners, people who understand it. Because, again, if you're looking, for the hedonistic element, you're looking to enjoy, man, cannabis has that. Even like you said, Susan Bratton, people don't realize, if you have sexual impotence, cannabis helps with that. You know what I mean? So I just want to show you just impacts or ways of using it that you never ever thought of. Like, I've never ever, I have not done a workout. Here's another real fact. I stay around 3% to 4% body fat, right? I believe largely that cannabis, because it's a huge anti-inflammatory, is beneficial along with my diet, helps that. But I'm not grilling myself with pills and things after I train. I don't have supplements and crap. A lot of it's plant based, and I want to show people that effect and what that does.
Mm. Um, Thank you for sharing that, and I agree with you. I think the narrative around the idea of the fastest man on land and the fastest man in the water, and some of the other best in other modalities and other sports, is the common narrative is just like, well, oh, imagine what they could have done without it. And it's like, well, you're imagining it in the benefit possibly because you have this negative connotation around it. But I imagine it as they probably would be able to do it because of said pain
Hmm.
or because of, X, Y, and Z, right? So it's interesting because like even Mike Tyson, right? He's a cannabis advocate and he's one of the most fierce boxers on this planet. And now like there's this magazine, I think it's an online magazine called Sports Cannabis. Do you know it? Sports,
Mm-hmm.
yes, Sports Cannabis.
Hmm.
What they're doing is highlighting exactly what you just brought up and what I'm talking about now. Is they're now opening up this spotlight for those who have been regarded as some of the best athletes in their various fields, and now putting them in the spotlight in a way that is beautiful. And I love that. Like I think it's like to see that there's been people like Allen Iverson and Randy Jackson and so many different people like in the NBA, they're like now able to come out and talk about their use, and we all kind of knew it, but now they're able to talk about it in a way that doesn't get them vilified necessarily, And so I don't think we should be writing people off for medicating the way that they want to medicate, but it is again, it's about checking in versus checking out, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways from this show so far. It's just checking in versus checking out. It's interesting.
But that goes back largely to a lot of the mental health aspect that I talk about. My thing for usage wasn't because I was trying to be this hedonist and all that. I was trying to remedy myself of really bad toxic traits. It was the addiction, it was the anger, and a lot of that. It was the trauma suppression. So what people don't, and in the podcast I had with Sean, it definitely helps. It's an enhancement on some of these things. I didn't use it, like I said, to check out. I used it to check in. After I stopped with the alcohol, and I was really deep into my sobriety. I went into my therapy, and there's parts that I talked to Sean. There's parts in therapy. There's parts in your life that you get through that you can't navigate. You just can't get through because they carry so much emotional subtext to them. There's things that I can navigate, and I can even look at, like you and I talked, and oh man, we'll probably have to chop it up after this, but we talked about our kids, and not being able to see our children without cannabis. Man, I don't navigate that landscape without cannabis. Man, I'm a shriveling, I'm a sniveling, crying idiot. But with cannabis, allows me to be able to look at that for what it is. The goods, the bads, even to see the gratitude that I have that I'm able to experience this right now, because
Mm,
it's not going to be forever. It's not going to be forever. So
Helps you become the observer.
yeah.
man, Gordon, that is it. That man, that's the word that I've been looking for. The observer, the observer.
Mm.
Without it, we're constantly trying to live, and it helps you be the observer.
Mm, that is powerful.
So,
And that moment that you talked about that.
and on that note, that's all I like.
Yeah, sorry, I think it cut out there for a second, but I was just saying, like, um, that's one of those moments in Sean T's podcast when you mentioned that piece about how you know you being able to formulate some kind of emotional situation, right? Like you can formulate what you need to say and also let it come out because it's suppressing some of that ego, and now you can actually be emotional. And this is one thing, especially as African American males coming up in today's world, right? It's like one of the things that, and I don't even want to just say just African Americans, but usually most males in this heavily masculine society, they're taught to be tough, don't cry, suck it up, be a man. And like, what does that mean? And so when you can kind of strip some of that back and you can understand that you just being genuine, being who you really are and being able to talk about that. And if the
Mm,
people around you can't accept that, then that should show you that that's your filter. Cannabis could be your filter. Anything that allows you to kind of understand and see, to be the observer. Like, we want to surround ourselves with people that are going to elevate all of us, with or
Mhm.
without cannabis, right? And sometimes you just need to be shown it. You need to pull the curtains back and go, ah, I see you now. That's the observer, right?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And again, why I'm like smiling is because I'm thinking about the experiences when you're in a deep session and you're locked in. You're like, I am the observer here, and it's so I don't think that people get how emotionally even that's stimulating. I think even in this conversation, and I'm not. And what I love about you and I, no one's posturing for position. Nobody's jockeying because they got to get their word in. And the challenge, I think, with today's society, we've become so big on delivering our message. We've become so intent on listening with the intent on speaking without just truly receiving what people have to say and just their presence. Like I love what you just said, as being the observer, Gordon, because with cannabis, man, like I've never felt like I could be that way. I felt that because
Mm.
of past agreements, because of past things that I always had to. And what you said earlier, going back to what you said earlier, because of who I am and what society says that I am, I have to be a certain way. Like, being a black male carries so much connotations, like you're this big black male. Man, like the minute you hear me, it's off-putting. People are like, you don't sound like I think you should sound.
One of the things I wanted to make sure we put out there before we start to kind of go into the last couple of questions, because we've got a lot of great nuggets of information, pun intended, from this chat. And and so I know we're going to be able to resonate with a lot of people. And what I would like to offer for people, so I think we've drawn a great picture with this idea of like understanding this societal pressures from lots of different people, people of color, people of non-color, and we also talked about family situations and being emotional, and we talked about sports, and we talked about health and wellness, and all these preconceived notions. The overarching idea is that, like, let's just be a bit more open and empathetic and learn, right?
Mm,
Let's not just say because we saw something online that that's the fact. Sometimes we actually just need to get our hands dirty and become our own biohacker and actually try some of these
mm,
things out. And for instance, if you're not the type of person that goes and plays basketball or does BJJ or goes for a marathon. In fact, I wish I knew about the Hindu Kush when I ran the marathon, because that probably would have helped me. Uh, but one of the things that I would suggest is, like, first of all, try this in your home environment where you feel the most safe. And then
mm,
you connect with someone that you feel most safe with, if you're going to do it with someone, because that sets the setting, you know, and that sets the set, right? So proper set and setting. And then you can set an intention. What are you looking to do? How do you want to check in versus checking out, right? That's important. And then I would also offer, again, besides the my profound experience playing basketball and having it feel like the Matrix, another thing I like to do, I love to do, is breath work, meditation, and massage while being elevated. Massage while being elevated, for me, massage feels like I literally feel like the person is one with my muscles and my joints and my ligaments. And it's literally the most profound experience.
Mhm.
So if you've never
mm.
tried that, I suggest anyone listening right now get a good balance of CBD to THC. Make sure to have your high dose CBD with you just in case, and then go and try that out. If you've ever felt like massages are too painful for you, you might forget all about that if you're elevated properly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So, okay, Charles, we've been chopping it up for quite a while, and this has been wonderful, been fascinating. I see the cat is making an appearance in the background there. Um, I now want to transition to the last couple of questions that I like to ask on this show, and this is fun, and not to say that it's any more fun than we're already having. But what are a couple pet peeves of yours? What are a couple things that just get under your skin? And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about cannabis or fitness or whatever.
You know what? We talked about this. I think the biggest pet peeve anymore these days is indifference. Indifference is probably the biggest one. We live in an automation where everything is just so quick and we're so instantly gratifying. With that being said, my pet peeve is, you text people and they don't respond. Like suicide and depression are huge, right? And me being that kind of person, my whole thing is, the indifference. So, because I've suffered from anxiety and depression a lot, sometimes it's not always easy to communicate. So I'd say the biggest thing is, even if it's hard for you, even at the basis level, like sometimes, text, because that's one of the biggest ways that we do now is just, communicate, even an emoji, is suffice. But we live in a day and age and thinking that it doesn't matter, you know, nobody cares, or you think that it's unimportant, or I'll get around to it. With, 1 in 4 adults committing suicide, it's getting up there now, right? It's bad. The little things help. It's the little things, and like, I think that why I'm on this tangent of, or this pet peeve, is because suicide's been really bad lately with a few friends that I've lost. So just communication's key. I hate the fact that we think that communication has been achieved when it hasn't. So my pet peeve is indifference. Everything matters. Like, that person that you see on the street that has a nice blouse on, tell them. Never think that any compliment or you want to say to some,
Yeah. Yeah.
put in context how the little things have a bigger impact than you realize. There's this picture that I posted on LinkedIn, and it's this black guy, this kid, and on the bridge, and then there's this police officer. And have you ever read the book Contagious? About social currency.
Mm-mm.
So the picture of these two people, it's a cop and a guy,
Mm.
and he's very distraught, and you later on find out that the cop is consoling him because he wanted to commit suicide. He was going to jump off that bridge, in the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Then juxtaposed right next to it is a picture of them, and they're smiling, they're happy. And the story was, I don't know what the day was, but the guy had a horrible day. He was 18 years old, had a horrible day, and thought, this is it. He wanted to jump off the bridge. And the cop, who was probably my age, I don't think they talk his age, 44 or whatever. It talks about, he's telling him, hey, look. Cop told him, he just said to him, because the kid thought his day was horrible. He wants to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. He's like, I'm gonna jump. And the cop was like, no, don't jump. Just give me one more day. Just give me one more day. So the kid gives him one more day. And I think that he ends up going home that day. He gets a call about a job. He ends up getting a job because the whole reason why he wanted to die was because, I have nothing to live for. So he ended up, living another day, which he ended up getting the job. And then the picture that's juxtaposed,
Yeah, you're
the picture that juxtaposed is right by it's of them happy and they're best friends now. And the reason why I said about the book, Contagious, why I post that on social media and all that, is because these stories and all these things have impact, more than you even realize. So what Contagious talks about is how things stick and why they stick. So stories of that, like stories when people almost lost their life and they found out they have currency, and those things you want to share. You want to share those stories of, somebody almost lost their life. You want to share these things, and it talks about that. But that was the book, that book Contagious is the book that 50 Cent read. That is why he bought vitamin water. It talks about why you or social proofing. That the book Contagious was the book that spurred on him buying vitamin water. It spurred on a lot of great inventions or great ideas for a lot of people, because it talks about why we do the things that we do. How does that video on TikTok go viral? How does that story that gets 100 million shares get shared? The story that I told you, it has human impact. It has human sentiment.
I would love to know, what is something that you are most grateful for?
I'm most grateful for all the experiences I've had. Right now, I'm currently 7 years sober, and it was rough, but I'm incredibly grateful for the sobriety and the people that I have in my life, and just the experiences that I've had, man. Right now, I think at 43, these have been the best times of my life, without any inebriation or anything to block me. So I'm really excited to see what the second half of life really, brings to me. So I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything, good and bad.
That's beautiful. Okay, and what is the best way for people to follow you, to keep in touch with what you've got going on? What are the best ways to keep in touch with you?
Yes, man. Thank you. So you can get in touch with me at my IG page there. It's Professor X Charles underscore J underscore Flanagan. I'm on Twitter. I'm not as active on Twitter. I don't like a lot of things that are going on, but I'm on Twitter. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, I'd say IG is a great way. I have my website profile or whatever link you can get a hold. You can also email me, if you have any questions, anybody who suffers from any suicide or disease. I put this on my podcast. I put this always out there. I always want to see you survive. So if you ever feel like you're having thoughts and things are too rough, shoot me an email. Shoot me an email. Shoot me a DM. I'll talk you off that ledge. And the reason why I throw this out there is because there may be a time when I need you, and the reciprocity in the universe is big to me. So
That's major, and thank you for sharing that. And I'll double up on that as well. I'm here as well. And yeah, man, this has been a very eye-opening, enlightening, and elevated conversation. And I want to thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the support. And anybody listening and watching this show, please go and check out what he's doing. Hit him up, connect with him. I promise you'll be motivated. If nothing else, it's gonna definitely make you want to work out. So
thank you, bro.
yeah, cool. Okay, well, this has been a great chat with Charles Flanagan. We've talked about a lot. We're gonna bring him back at some point soon, hopefully. But until next time, this is Josh signing out from Simply Walk the Talk. Peace.
Simply walk the talk. Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.